Look, I keep it on to the team. You can't play the keys. Ain't shit sweet. Got soldiers on deck, and my youngin' did a sweet. This a whole nother way, boy. Tell her get the fuck off the beach, boy. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here preach. They're going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go to tree. Going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go to tree. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here preach. Going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go to tree, boy. This shit is 2 weeks. I'm gonna go, but they don't believe me. You know I'm winning with the team. And the devil screaming out bloody murder. That bitch ain't working. Sorry, all them lies that ain't working. You niggas weak. I'm a West nigga, that's for certain. They cross the line, I'ma back up and I'ma hit his ass with his Bible. And I come through 300 strong, 144 live night. When niggas weak, men this bitch with the hype. They say, oh, y'all do the sweet. Tell y'all do the sweet. The nigga made the wrong move when he make his ass. I said, they ain't one of us hit the lead. They ain't one of us here preach. Go through all black, gully jack, man. All the niggas go retreat. Go there, I keep it on to the team. You can't play the keys. Ain't shit sweet. Got soldiers on deck, and my youngin' did a sweep. This a whole nother way. Tell her get the fuck off the beach. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here preach. They're going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. Going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here preach. Going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. You want this look that's on my face, bitch, I'm for real with it. I hit the street, but all my kids was in the field with it. You saw this guy listen after. My target's on the moment, I can steal it. Hey, I speak true cause it's necessary. Color Jack revolutionary. Cold on them like January. Commanding dinner is a visionary. Soul food, no sweets. Matter of fact, he weak. It's war time, but we say you hard, nigga, you ain't. But with us, nigga, you can't. You smart cars, we tanks. We form up, feel ranks. We body bag this rap shit. All black, no white shit. Real life, no cap, bitch. Oh Lord, that's cap shit. I keep it on to the tip. U.P.K play the keys. Ain't shit sweet. Got soldiers on deck, and my youngins did a sweet. This a whole nother way. Tell her get the fuck off the beach. I'm in the field with the cleats. Ain't one of us here preach. They're going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. Going through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas. Ain't one of us here preach. Go through all black, gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat, boy.
Shalom Israel, shalom, shalom. We are the I.S.U.P.K out of 1 West 125th Street and the commanding GEN.YAHANNA. I'm Precinct Officer Isupk out of the Trinidad camp, and today is our Lashawan Qadash, where we get back into our history, our culture, and everything that is Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians. Right? This book that we call the Bible, right? It's our book, right? The book is written by black men, right? Not Africans. So we don't get that mistaken, right? There's a difference between Africans and Negro, right? Who we call so-called black. All right, there's a difference in the race of people. So today, as we go into the Lashawan Qadash, as it says, which means holy tongue, right? That is what we call also as well the tongue of angels, right? Which is the ancient Hebrew. So tonight we're gonna go back into some basics, which is the Hebrew alphabet, right? And go into the genesis of how the Hebrew language is created, all right? So again, as you go through the course of time, you'll actually see how the entire language of the earth derives from the Lashawan Qadash, the holy tongue, right? From Noah, when he had his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, come along to the lineage of Shem, come right down to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our forefather of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. All right, so tonight we're going to go into the alphabet. Which really showing the genesis of the Lashawan Qadash. So a lot of persons do understand that, some more space, is that how we have the written language today, right, was a bit different in ancient time, right? The script, right, or pictograms or pictograph that we had back then was different. So we used to use symbolisms or characters, which is the proper word, right? We didn't have letters, we had characters, and these characters depicted different things, right? That would mean something. So a good example for most persons who understand, when you look at the Egyptian society, right? They would have a lot of so-called writings on their wall. So they would have, let's say, something like a bird, right? Oh, this is the bird with some wings, right? A beak. Now they would have a bird with a crook stick, something, and that would mean something. So the bird would mean fly, and this might be represent probably a tree with something on here. So this could mean fly on top hill, right? And that is how, you know, the language is written. As you know, Hebrew is the oldest language, the oldest script, and most of all the other languages are derived from the ancient Hebrew. As we go into the scriptures, we'll be able to see from the genesis of how the languages have spread through the earth in all the different societies, right? When we look at the Tower of Babel, right, or Babel, as some people would say, at that time there was one language being spoken, and the reason for that one language is because that is what they had from the beginning. So during Adam's time, there was one language, and all the men spoke. And after that, when it was destroyed by the Most High through the flood, we had Noah and his 3 sons, and they spoke that ancient language. Now, fast forward a couple years down, then we had Nimrod. And with Nimrod now, because of the one language, all the peoples who were around at that time, right? Nimrod brought all of those people together, started to build the Tower of Babel, and then, as you know, they were trying to reach the Most High, right? Reach into the stars, just like what our so-called oppressor is doing right now, trying to go into the stars, going up in the moon, they have a spaceship, and all these other capabilities now. So the same thing that they were doing back then is the same thing that they are trying now, because they were trying to come under one language, one banner, one understanding. And this is the thing that the Most High, you know, destroyed during that time. So what we will do, just to start with the class, is to get that scripture, and I'll pull it up here, which is in Genesis, right? Just talking about Babel when Nimrod. All right, so let's see. Right, so that's Genesis 10. Right, so in Genesis 10, it really giving you that breakdown of the language situation, and then there was a language barrier after a particular event. Should I have it? 10 and I think it's from 10 and 10 or 10 and 9.
mighty hunter.
Right. So you can start from there. And then from there you could drop down into understanding, you know, how the earth's language was developed.
Right? The book chapter 9 and verse 9. So okay, chapter 10 and verse 9. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord.
Right. So this is Nimrod. Now this is one of the sons of Ham, right? That became a mighty warrior and subdued a lot of tribes, kingdoms at that time. Continue.
Wherefore, it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, of his kingdom was Babel,
right,
and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh,
right,
in the land of Shinar.
Right. So Babel was the name of that place that Nimrod started to build that tower. Right. So as we continue, we'll get that understanding. So let's jump down to verse 20.
The book of Genesis, chapter 10 and verse 20. These sons of Ham,
right,
after their families, after their tongues.
After their what?
After their tongues.
Right.
In their countries.
Right.
And in their nation.
And in their nation. So this was Billy again giving you that description of all the tribes and everybody, you know, coming together as one. I said all their sons, all their tribes, all their tongues, everybody was in one accord for the sons of Ham. Continue, verse 21.
Verse 21. Unto Shem, also the father of all the children of Eva.
Of who?
Of all the children of Eva.
Right, and Eva, right, which is Iba in the Hebrew, is where you get the word Hebrew, which means from the past. Right? Which means from the past. So these languages, right, or the main language is Hebrew. This is where the definition, and this is where what we call the original tongue kept its lineage. Go ahead.
The brother of Japheth.
The brother of who?
The brother of Japheth.
Right.
The elder. Even him were children born. Verse 22. The children of Shem. Elam.
Was who?
The children of Shem.
Right.
Elam.
Right.
And Ashur. And Arphaxad.
Right.
And Lud. And Aram. Verse 23.
Right. Pause right there. As well. So we see in here where right, so we have Eba, right, which is where we get the Hebrew from, which means from the past. And also when you look again, you'll see some more sons of Shem, which is Elam, Assur, which I believe would be the Assyrians when they carried Loa down, right? Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. No, this is where the other aspects of the languages come, where some people say the ancient language of Aramaic, right? Now these languages or these places or countries were named after men, and this is what we need to understand. So when we get to understand that, we'll get that clarity of where certain type of languages come from, right? These languages and places are named after the people who inhabited the area and the language that they spoke, right? Or that dialect, if you want to put it like that. Because very, very similar, like we say, like we have here in Trinidad, I speak English, right? But the dialect of English I speak might be different from somebody who's British or somebody who's right in the Caribbean. In Jamaica, we don't speak like Jamaicans. It may be similar, it's English, but it's a different dialect, right? So these all the different things we have to understand. Now Hebrew, right, along with all these other languages, the other languages are like dialects of the original ancient Hebrew, right? Which is Iba, right? Which is the language from the past, which was the old language, right? And it's also referred to in the scriptures as the tongues of angels, right? So we'll get a scripture again lower down. So we had to understand the history and the culture of the ancient Hebrew. Now, when they say Aramaic, this is where they got the so-called name, because Aram was one of the sons of Shem, right? So Aramaic is what we call today like the Assyrian tongue type language. That script is what they use and what they call Aramaic. Aramaic is different from the ancient Hebrew, right? Continue.
Verse 23. And the children of Aram, Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Mash.
Right.
Verse 24. And Arphaxad begat Selah, and Selah begat Eber.
Right. So Eber, again, is the one from the lineage that kept the original language, the original tongue. Now, and it makes special reference to that because as the story goes down, you'll get to understand what took place at that time that makes it significant. Continue.
Canaan, and unto Eber were born two sons.
Right.
The name of one was Peleg.
Was who?
Peleg.
Peleg.
For in his days was the earth divided.
Right. So in his days was the earth divided. So why is the scripture specifically saying that? What divided the earth at that time? And as we go through the scriptures, we get to understand what took place. What divided the earth at that time? Continue.
Canaan, verse 26. And Joktan begat Almodad, and Hazamavet,
right,
and Jerah.
And Jerah. But drop down to verse 31.
Canaan, verse 31. These are the sons of Shem,
right,
after their families, after their tongues, in the lands after their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah,
right,
after their generation, in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood.
And these were where the nations were divided. So everybody wasn't kumbaya. Everybody was, jahajibai. They were what? Separate. You understand? And the Most High created separation for a reason. You understand? Because the world pushing, everybody one language, one people, one this, one that. That was never so from the beginning. The Most High always separated a special people from everybody else. You understand? And even with there is still separation among the tribes. There's a distinct identity with every single tribe in the nation of Israel. Everybody has their characteristics, everybody has their quality, their style, their swag. And there is something unique about each tribe that the other tribe can't mimic. You understand? I want to look through even today. When you look at Benjamin, right? That is the so-called West Indians. That is from Grenada, Trinidad, Jamaica, and all the Caribbean islands except Cuba, Haiti, and Dominica, and Puerto Rico, right? Except those Caribbean islands, those are different tribes. Ephraim is Puerto Rico, Cuba is Manasseh, Dominica, I think is Haiti. No, Dominica is Simeon, and Haiti is Levi. All right? All right, so the Cubans, I think Cuban Manasseh, right, are those people, what we call the so-called Cubans, right? So when you look at all those different aspects, each tribe have such different characteristics and flair and style. It's difficult to really say, it's difficult to say that they're the same, but they are the same. You understand? Because why? We are all brothers, every single one of us, right? So let's run on the list of all the nation of Israel. We have Judah, which is the so-called Black Americans, right? Benjamin, the so-called West Indians, Levi, which is the Haitians, Simeon, which is the Dominicans, Zebulun, Guatemala, that is the natives from Guatemala to Panama, right? Ephraim, the so-called Cubans, Manasseh, Gad, which is the North American Indians, Reuben is the so-called Seminole Indians, Asher is the natives and slave people from Colombia to Uruguay. Then we have Naphtali, right, which is the natives and slaves from the people from Argentina to Chile. So you're seeing the distinctions among the people, all right? And Issachar is what we call the so-called Mexicans. So we know the Mexicans had their own swag and style. The Jamaicans, different, West Indians, the Seminole Indians. And when you look of who we are as a people, we have one spirit, you understand, but still have different vibes. You understand? This is where, you know, we get our uniqueness from, right? And with that now, we even get our own style and swag. So a brother who lives here, like myself, I live in Trinidad. If I go to Texas, you understand, we speak English, but that style of language, that dialect would be different. Because a lot of persons, even like how I'm speaking here now, even though I'm speaking English, would find it hard to follow my particular dialect. Even though we are speaking the bastardized language of Hebrew and the language of our oppressor, right? Because this is a oppressor's language, English or Spanish, right? All those are oppressors' language, French, Creole, understand? And this is showing you the creativity of Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians. Even when we are oppressed, we still create our own language, because Creole is a perfect example of our Haitian brothers. You understand? That's a whole different genre, right? If I were to call it that, using that music application. Creole is something totally different to French. You understand? Similar, but it's different. You understand? They have their own books, they have their own writing, and all that still incorporates our native tongue, right? When you look at some of those old slave movies, they're singing Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya, it's still representing what the early language of our forefathers. So as we go through the language aspect, we'll get to see the genesis of everything. So what we will do is just go into now, Salakia. I think it's on chapter 11, where it starts with how the language itself was broken down. So continue.
The book of Genesis, chapter 11 and verse 1. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. Verse 2. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there.
Right, so this is an area now. Now, a plane is not the one that is flying in the sky, right? This plane they're talking about is a flat, broad landmass. So picture like a big savanna or a huge meadow. For those who understand those terminologies, it's like a huge area of just flat, open land. No big trees, it's like grass. Huge grasslands, right? So that was called a plain. For miles, all you can see is just flat area, no trees, nothing. So that's a plain. Continue.
And they dwelt there.
Right, so they decided to shut up shop and build a city there.
Verse 3. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they for mortar. Verse 4. They said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth.
Right, so this now, so they decided to come up with this great plan now. They say, here, let me come together, all of us, and let us build this place and make a name for ourselves. Now, this is very peculiar because by them saying that, they want to promote themselves. You understand? When somebody says, I want to make a name for myself, they want to be what? Famous. How are you going to get famous? You have to be able to do something or challenge someone that has some sort of power. And in this case, who they want to challenge? The Most High. Continue.
Verse 5. And the Lord came down.
Came down and looked at everything. Now, in this place, it's not talking about the Most High himself that came down. The Most High never touched this earth. The angels of the Lord are the ones who do everything for the Most High on earth. So when he said the Most High came down, he did come down, but through his what? Representative, which is the angels.
Verse 6. And behold, the Lord said, behold, the people is one. They are all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do.
Right. So when they realize, hey, these were them fellas looking to do here now, all right. Because they took up this, how I should put it, idea or the audacity of them to really to challenge the Most High. He say, here, well, you got to do something about it. You understand? Because if they come together, they will what? Attempt or try, just like what our oppressors doing now, to come up against the Most High, or try to come against the plans of the Most High. Continue.
Verse 7. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Verse 8. And the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city.
Right. So the idea, when the Most High realizes, so he said, let us. Again, he's talking about the angels, right? So he's going to give them instruction to do something about what's happening down there. Another great example of that particular command is when, you know, the Most High spoke to the angels concerning Ahab, if I'm not mistaken, when he said, who would go down, you understand, and convince him, you understand, to go and die. I think it's in Ramat Gilead, right? And then one spirit come and say, what? I'll be what? A lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets, right? So again, you see the inner workings of how the Most High deal with situations here on the earth. Continue.
Verse 8. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Verse 9. Therefore it is the name therefore is the name of it called Babel.
Right.
Because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth.
Right. So because of that now, the say here what? This plot or this plan or they want to try to come up here with, are going to destroy that. The that is to what? Confound their language. As you know, for any civilization to build or to thrive, there must be a common language, a common goal. So that is why, like even now, for us here in Trinidad, we have our brother the Ishikarites, right? Sorry, Asherites, which is the so-called Venezuelans. They are immigrating across to Trinidad because of hardship in the country of Venezuela. We speak English here. Right next door, our neighbors, the Venezuelans, speak Spanish. Now, we have a long history between Trinidad and Venezuela, but not as close as we would like it. Otherwise, it would have been very common for us to speak Spanish or for them to speak English. But even though we are so close, we are still very much divided. So when these immigrants came across here to Trinidad, there's still a great language barrier where you can barely function properly because we just can't communicate simple, right? There always has to be some form of translation, and because there's no proper communication, somebody will take advantage of another person, right? And it would usually be the person who comes across into the foreign land, they would be the ones usually being oppressed most times. So that would happen. Most of our Ashred brothers come across, and these other nations, the Chinese, the East Indians, and even some of our own people oppress our brothers, the Asherites who come across here because of the language barrier. All right? That was it on that?
Come on, that was the end of verse 9.
I don't see what the other verse saying.
Come on. The book of Genesis, chapter 11 and verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood.
All right. Right, so he begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Just read over from top one more time.
The book of Genesis, chapter 11 and verse 10. These are the generations of Shem.
Right.
Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood.
Right. So this was along the time when Arphaxad was born, and when you look at the genealogy, right, when they read it down, you're going to realize how close, Eba was born around that time. So during that turbulent time, where all these tribes, all these people have to separate because we can't understand each other, you go in your land, so I go in my land here, I speak my language, you speak your language, and there was a great separation. And because of that separation, they could not build or continue to build what they were trying to do, which was to build this tower to reach the most high, to go up in the sky. The white man always loved to go in all these skyscrapers, the tallest building you could find. He wanted to go Mount Everest. You understand? He wanted to go Mount Kilimanjaro. And here's the problem: the natives who live in that area, they don't care to go up there. You understand? But somehow he coming out of wherever he is, he wants to go up to the top there. To say he's the first one to reach up. He want to what? Build his nest in the stars. So all these scriptures, you get to understand who these people are and the prophecies that follow him. Right? That spirit is always there. So now we'll go into the alphabet itself, and we'll get to understand the aspect of things of how the language was written. Right? So we have in the beginning here, which is A, which is the first letter of the ancient Hebrew. Right? As you can see, it looks very similar to what we would call, again, the letter A. So this is A in the ancient Hebrew, and this is the letter A, right? Which is very similar, which is again derived from the ancient Hebrew, a bastardized version. This looks very similar. The only difference is that this is still on the side, and most times this is cut off the little extra that it will have it, but it's pronounced the same way. So without a doubt, you could see where the transfer of this ancient language is trickles down. And English is probably one of the newest, quote unquote, or the youngest, one of the younger languages that are found upon the face of the earth. Right? So we have A, which is ancient Hebrew. Now we have the ancient, and then we have the Assyrian. Now again, there's the history of the Assyrian dialect and language, what the so-called Jewish man will speak today. You understand? With the A and Beth and Aleph and whatever that bastardized homosexual type language that they speak. Because we know ancient Hebrew have no E and no E and all that kind of aspect of the ancient language. But because of what we call the captivity, right, during that time, and that captivity was what we call the Babylonian captivity, right? And they spoke what that Assyrian language and dialect. And there's a difference between the Assyrian and the ancient Hebrew. And again, there's another scripture that we want to pull, talking about in the Hebrew tongue. That is where there was a war between the Assyrians and Israel, but the language was different. So, let's see if I can pull up that. Right, I think that's one is in, I think it's in the Kings. So I don't know if you might be able to pull it up. Let's see if I can get it here. But it really is showing the difference, but yet the similarities of the ancient Hebrew and the Assyrian. Right, so let's see if we get it here. So now Hebrew is only mentioned a few times, especially in the Old Testament. And for us to really understand that our forefathers from I.S.U.P.K kept the ancient language, right? We were the only ones who were called what? Hebrew. Because why? That was synonymous to the language that we spoke, right? And if we go back to Genesis 14 and 13, that will give you an idea of the people who were called because of the language and also of the lineage.
The book of Genesis, chapter 14 and verse 15. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram, the Hebrew.
The who?
The Hebrew.
Right. And he was the only one called what? The Hebrew, because of his lineage. Continue.
For he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Anak, and these were confederate with Abram.
Right. So at that time, Abraham was dwelling in this place here, and them used to go down good, even though they're not the same people. They had some agreements with each other. That's why they say they were confederate. So Abraham had men, very well trained men. You understand? Because they used to use them in war, and he would probably take jobs with these men and do different stuff, have his own place at that time. So here you see where the word Hebrew is used for the first time, showing the not just the lineage, but who being a Hebrew identifies. Right? And when you go lower down, right, I think is, let me see if I can find it. Right, Slovakia. Right, so let me see. Jeremiah. Oh, it's in the Jewish language. Right, so this is just one thing I'm going to pull up here. Right, speaking about the so-called Jewish language. Right, so this is, no, it's not it. I can't remember the exact scripture, but I shall probably get it before the end of the night. But again, just referencing, at that time, the Assyrians came up to the Jew, I think it's Hezekiah was the king at the time, and they came and they were more or less mocking the Jews and telling them, what if you would, drink your own pee, you understand, and eat your own dung. And they were speaking via an interpreter. You understand? One was speaking the Assyrian language, we were speaking what? Hebrew. You understand? And that was the main difference. There was still a difference in the language in itself, even though the origin, you understand, is the ancient Hebrew, which we spoke. Right? So with that being said, as we go into the characters, which what we see here, we'll get a better understanding. So we have A, and this is Ba. What I will do, I create another sub area. For the sound, right, and this could throw down the middle. So I'm doing it just to capture everything so that you get a better understanding. So the letter or the pronunciation is, this is A, this is Ba, right? We have, this means an ox, right? This is a tent. So we have here, and this is the, and we'll write one more. So we have these first four characters, which is A, Ba, Ga, and Da. So A, which is the first one, right? A, which is the first character. This is the ancient, this is the Assyrian. Now, understanding the, what we call characters, or some people would say is a pictograph, where it's depicting some particular thing, and that gives a particular meaning. And that's being described here because A, which is the sound of pronouncing the character, right? So you have the A, which represents what, the head of an ox. If you see how a cattle is, or ox, you will have the two big horns, which is here, and this is the shape of the head. right? So if you already look at how the ancient people used to draw animals, you would see this is the shape or the head of an ox or a cattle, right? So this is A, and it represents or signifies power or authority. As you know, an ox or a cattle or a bull is a very strong animal, right? It uses the plow, uses the pull stuff, very muscular, a lot of meat, right? So it symbolizes a lot of strength because an ox is very strong. It pulls 3, 4, 5, sometimes 8 times its actual weight or what you would think it would be able to pull, right? I've seen ox-drawn carts pulling tons of sugarcane, tons, pulling huge logs. Up to last week, I see a post on Facebook where a man saying, he had this ox pulling out a van that's sticking some mud. And he said, "Here, this is the original 4x4. You understand? The vehicle's 4x4 couldn't work because too much mud. So he bring an ox, tie a rope on it, and the ox drag out that van normal, like nobody's business. You understand? And the ox is so, gritty that when it's under pressure, it even goes down on its knees trying to pull the load. I tell you how much the determination the animal has when it's trying to pull a particular R, which is ox, which is pronounced R, which symbolizes power or authority. So when you see this symbol, right, by itself, it could represent or does represent power or authority, or also represent being an ox or an animal in that aspect, or cattle to be more specific. And this is the Assyrian dialect. This is the dialect that we adopted when we were in the captivity of the Assyrians, right? Some of the characters are very similar because of, as you know, the relationship between the Hebrew and the Assyrian dialect, right, which comes from Aram. Then we have the second one, which is Ba. So you have Ba, which means tent. Now this is symbolic. Now when you look at how a tent is designed, you will be able to understand this particular drawing, right? This is like the front part of the tent of how it's made, right? So if you look at it carefully, you will be able to get that vision. For those who are familiar with it, they will see it off the back. Some persons, not so, right? But a tent or bar in this case would represent a house or a family, right? So this is what it would represent, bar, right? It translates that tent, but also synonymous to house and family because that is where you would have your family in your tent, right? So that was one of the symbols to represent a family or a house. Then we have Ga. So you have A, Ba, Ga, which means to walk or to gather, right? So if you're gathering stuff, you're walking and you're picking up stuff going, right? It represents that. But what gives it that character, that meaning, is what it represents, which is the foot. So as we know, your foot is shaped like an L. The lower part of your foot, where your ankle and the flat part of your feet is. So all this could be, what do you call this area? Between your knee and your bottom part of your foot. Can't remember the scientific term, but this particular part I think is the femur. The femur is the arm. I ain't so sure, but this is really representing your foot, flat part with your ankles. That is what it represents. So, seeing that it represents the foot, it will also represent to walk or to gather, right? So that is ga. Then we have da, which means door. Now again, if you look to the front of a tent, And again, a good example is our native brothers who kept a lot of the traditions that we had from ancient time, right? If you look at how the so-called native Indians had their tent, so picture this was the tent, and within the tent itself you'll have a door. So this would be the native tent. You'll have a little smoke coming out, but in front of this tent, which is shaped like a kind of cone, right, you will have a cut, which was the door, right, of that tent. And that door was an entrance to the tent. So therein goes the meaning. Da means door or entrance. So this is, really understanding how to interpret the language. Just as how you have the so-called Egyptologists on all these walls of stone, trying to figure out what the hell is. All these little boxes have all these birds and animals and men and whatever other creatures they have in those boxes. And these Egyptologists trying to interpret. But at that time, those Egyptians were reading off that light just as how we read in English. So let's just say it's no different than if we take a Bible and you go down in the far reaches of Ulatunji, Ugamaga, somewhere in Africa, some native who never see nothing, and you put that in front of him, he will never clue. All he's seeing is just something, right? But to us, because we understand it, it's easy for us to interpret, right? So that is just the basics of how the language is structured. Now, based on this now, as the language develops, then we can add other stuff to it. When these characters come together, they form particular words or particular statements, right? But we'll go into that in another lesson. So this is just the first four, which is A, Ba, Ga. So we'll quickly go through some more. And again, ever so often we'll go through these basics because a lot of persons who are tuning into the classes for the first time may not fully understand sometimes the lessons we do just because they haven't gone through the basics. So again, knowing your basics is just like going to primary school, preschool. And with preschool, you're able to get the basic understanding. So you have A, Ba, Ga, Da. Then we have Ha. I'll put this in Wa, Za, and Ka. So I'll add in all the rest. So we start off with Ha. Right, so Ha. Right, so Ha. And this is the Assyrian. So we have Wa. Crutch. Now, some of these symbols, right, have a direct meaning, right? Some of them also have like split meanings, but some of them are just straightforward direct meanings of a particular thing. So, the peg or crutch, right? So, wa, you have za, and we have ka. Let's forget this card. Right, so now we have the other set here, which is ha, wa, za, and ka. Right. And so some of them have a direct meaning. In this case, ha, right, if you look at how it's designed, or how the character is, ha is a man arm raised, or your hand. So like if you do your hand like this, you understand, you will be able to see this ha represents the hand or a man arm raised, right? So this is what ha means if you're looking at it directly. Then we look at wa. Wa is a peg or a crutch. Now, for those who have had a broken leg, or those who have seen someone with a broken leg, a crutch or a peg is something you would put below your arm or on whichever side that the leg is injured, and you would use it to walk with. Now, in times past, they would cut a tree limb, right, that has a kind of Y shape, and that would holster up on either side, and you would hold it and you would walk. Now we have the so-called modern type. It's just a flat piece, chuck it right below, and you walk and go. So, and even when you look at the both characters, you will see similar design to what we use today. This is probably what the old school type, where it have the Y part, and this is probably like the more modern day crutch that we would have to stick on our arms to aid us in walking. So it would be either called a peg or a crutch. Then we have za. Now za represented a plow. Now for those who do understand what a plow is, you have to have some sort of agricultural background, or at least be able to look at some of those old movies, right? Those old movies, especially like the whole type of Western or medieval type movies, they would have the ox, or you would have two horses, and this plow would dig the ground. So it would be drawn with some ropes tied, it would be big, and the guy would have it in his hand, guiding it, and the horse or the ox or the donkey, it would be pulling this plow to dig up the dirt, right? Back then it had no John Deere and Massey Ferguson tractor, and you understand? That was the tractor back then. You understand? An ox, a donkey, or a horse. And in in more rigid times, in slavery, we were the ox, the ass, or the horse, because we used to actually pull the plows at times as slaves. In a sense, so somebody would hook up and you would pull it to dig up the dirt for when you go and plant. So when you look at the shape of it, this is what it actually looked like, right? Almost like a S or a Z, and in this case it's pronounced ZA, right, which represents a plow or a hoe. And if you look at the tool of a garden hoe, something that we would use to dig the soil, something very similar to it would be like those little hand rakes, right, that you would use in your flower garden. It would be something similar to that, right? And this is the Assyrian character for ZA. Then we have Ka. Now, Ka represents a wall. Now, for those, most people might be more understanding of this because of how it's shaped. A Ka would be, picture a wall, and we have here, then you're gonna have what, sections, right, in this wall. And again, this would be very common. Now, just imagine in ancient time, you want to build a home, or you want to build a fence around your property. You would get two sticks or two posts, right? Stick it in the ground, and guess what you would do? You would take strips of wood, these two posts, and you would put 3 logs across to prevent anything from coming in or from going out. And that's it. Very simple. And this in itself made a wall. Some persons would reinforce it, some persons would tie it, and that is how you would see where the character is developed, where it represents a wall. So that Gadaha Wazaka. Alright, so we'll go into a few more. Okay, all these fundamentals, once we understand it, all right, it will make the understanding of the language a lot easier for us to be able to get back to our native tongue and to be able to reclaim our history, our culture, and our language. So we have Abakadaha, Wazaka, then we have Ha, Ya, Ha, and La. In the ancient, it's Ta, Ya, Ka. Now there's Ha, which is the CH, Ka, and then there's Ka. So you have to be careful not to mix up the two. And then we have La. So the Assyrian for Ta all right, then we have the Ya, then we have the Ka, now this is where it starts to get a little more interesting. And I'll be able to show you what is actually taking place. Let's fix this character. So we have Ta, right, which means to brace, or in this case is a basket. So we go through all. Um, right, so we're going to go into these few here. So we have Ta, Ya, Ka, and La. You have A, Ba, Ga, Da, Ha, Waza, Ka, Ta, Ya, Ka, La. Now the word Ta in the ancient Hebrew, this is the character, and this is the Assyrian character. Ancient, now Ta represents, excuse me, a basket or to what? To brace. Right now, if you look at this carefully, again, these things are that we use every day. Now, look at how a basket was made in ancient time in a semicircle. So you would have one circle, and then from one end you would weave another part, or what should you call it? A stem or a branch, right? Or a cord, or some strong vine. You would weave from one end to the next and strengthen it. And when you keep on doing this now, right, you will realize eventually this would make the basket strong. And this is what we'd use now to carry stuff. And it had all kind of different designs of baskets, right? So this was used to represent a basket, or in this case, bracing this thing together, right? Bringing it, holding it together, right? This is Ta, right, which symbolizes a basket, right? And it also means to brace. This is Ta. This is the ancient, this is the Syrian. Even when you look at how the character is, this even more looks like how a basket would look like from the side view. This is more or less like how it would look from the top view. Then we have Ya. When you look at Ya, it means or symbolizes a fist closed. So if you look at how it is, if I hold my hand like this and I do this, you understand, you would see how the fist is, right? But do that, this is Ya. This is the ancient, and we have the Assyrian. If you look at a fist closed like this again, you would see how it's looked at from a different angle. But it represented or symbolized a closed fist, right? And this is what it was used for. Then we have either open, sorry, Ka in this case would represent either an open palm or a hand. Now, this really have 1, 2, 3, 4, but you know we have 5 fingers. So if you look at how your fingers are, if I do it like this or have it like this, these 4 fingers, right, you would see the similarities, right, of this character, right? So if you look at it this way, you would see the ka, which represents our hand. Then we have la. La, in this case, represented a shepherd's rod. Let me make sure I have this down. All right, a shepherd rod or a shepherd staff. So this staff, right, would be used to protect the sheep. This staff would be used to help rescue the sheep. So for instance, a sheep would fall down probably in a hole or a ditch. For those who have learned, who have seen again, who have reared animals, you would know a sheep is not a very smart animal. You understand? That is why they are so easily attacked by wild beasts and easily overcome. Right? They are not very capable of protecting themselves properly. Goats, on the other hand, have a little more venom, but sheep, they just did. They head down, they eat it, they won't see a wolf coming or a lion, whatever the case may be. They would just be oblivious to a lot of stuff. They would just be grazing, and they would graze and eat off the edge of a cliff. So you always had to be what? Protecting and watching over the sheep. Now the shepherd in those days would have this staff or this rod, which is a long rod with a slight bend or a slight hook on it. That would be used to what? To pull or to guide the sheep from where it was going. So if it falls in a ditch, he would take this rod or this staff and hook it probably below this belly, hind legs, and lift him out of the ditch, right? Or would use it to kind of corral the sheep from a particular area. Or he would use a stick now and defend the sheep from a wolf or a lion or a bear or something like that. This was both a weapon and a source of protection, you understand, for the sheep at that time. And that is what even in the scriptures, Christ is described as what? The good shepherd. And we were described as the sheep. The sheep, we were the so-called clueless animal where we needed protection. And Christ is that what? Shepherd who would protect us. Even David talking about in the scriptures, I think that was in Psalms 51, we talk about thy rod and thy staff shall comfort thee. It symbolized that source of what? Protection. That rod and that staff would, once that is there, the sheep are safe. Once the shepherd has that, he can defend the flock. And all these are different things that we have to understand. The importance. Now, the rod and the staff, or the shepherd's staff, or the symbol, the la, represented to teach, to bind, or to yoke. Right? So, as you know, binding would mean to hold something together. A yoke was used to put around the neck of an animal. And again, would use that staff to what? Hook either the torso or even around the head of the animal, and you could drag them out. Right? So this is what it actually symbolized in our ancient language and in our culture. So all this was, something that was really critical. Now, one thing I want to point out before we move on, right, is in the word or the letter ka. Now, ka, in this aspect here, has 2 characters. Now, what is significant about this is that ka, this character in the Assyrian was used at the beginning of a word. right? And this we use at the end. So now this character we use either at the beginning or anywhere else in the word, or in the middle. You get that? Marker. So, for instance, so this will be used at the beginning or middle. This will be used at the end. Now, so for instance, where this character, when you're forming a word or when you're forming a word with the characters, if ka falls either at the beginning of the word or anywhere in the middle, this character would be used only in the Assyrian. And if ka falls at the end, then this is the character that would be different, but gives a different connotation to what is being said. So at the beginning, or the middle, you would use this character in the Assyrian, and at the end, you would use this character. So all that is something they were taking note of in the ancient Hebrew when it's being written. All those are different aspects of the ancient Hebrew that you got to take a look at. So what I would do at this time, we would close it off here for tonight, and then in the other class we'll just drop back in, finish up the basics, and then use these words or these characters in the application, so you get to understand how to create words, how to create sentences, understand what's a prefix or a suffix, and how you see these characters being applied, what they actually mean when they bring these words together. And with that, I'll pass the class on to Priest and Officer Michael.
Announcements. We are the I.S.U.P.K out of 1 West, 120, under commanding General Yahanna. New rules for brothers and sisters. When a new brother or a sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to share themselves of the word. After 6 months, if your brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to the brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother or sister will court each other. After the 6-month period, the brother or sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. You can find this in Numbers chapter 18 and verse 21 and Malachi chapter 3 verses 8 to 10. Means tenth in the Hebrew and is pronounced ma'asra. 10% of every penny, of any penny, Salakia. 10% of any increase the Lord gives you, you give to the treasury department or teacher. Priest fund, free will offering for priests, not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you would like to give. Upcoming holy convocation. The upcoming holy convocation is the memorial blowing of trumpets, which is the first day of the 7th month in the Hebrew calendar, which is Monday, the 6th September, 2021. You can find this in Leviticus chapter 23, verses 24 to 25. Remind Archeum and Aquatium to check on social media, such as ISUPK.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so on for ISUPK events and materials. If a brother wants to become a trooper in the school, then he's to start wearing all black, which includes black boots, like shirt, like headbands or scarf. And with that, we say Madio. We're going to turn and face the east. And we're going to be here. Come on, Pastor. We're going to begin with the Lord's Prayer. Abanawa,
Abanawa, Shemayim, Qadash,
I.S.U.P.K,
Shemka,
Yahweh, Malakwatka, Taba'a, Ratazaka, I.S.U.P.K, Baratiza, Kawa, Bashemaya, Latana, Lakam, Yawam, Wasalakna, Kawawatna, Kasalakna, Kawawatina, Wala'a, Tabayanawa, Malasaiwan, Abad, Awashino, Mayan, Rai, Kaya, Laka, Amalakwa, Waha'ala, Watapara, I.W.A, Aman.
We just say here now in English, our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Yahweh, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. So be it.
Sir, let's give the teacher a one courtesy salute. Amadim Shabbat, Amadim, Barak, Yahweh Ba Shem Yoshabakatah,
Yahweh Ba Shem Yoshabakatah,
Yadad Matah. Sir, let's give the sisters a one courtesy salute. Amadim Shabbat, Amadim, Barak, Yahweh Shemar Latan Ba Shem Yoshai, Yadad Matah. Class dismissed.